Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Stacy Weber. I'm an instructor with Pragmatic Marketing, and today I'd like to welcome you to this month's webinar. As you may know, we've been doing these webinars every month. It's a good way to just to start thinking about some different topics. Today we're going to be looking at how product managers can work with UX designers to create great products. During the presentation, if you have questions, you can type those into your interface, and we'll get to those questions periodically, and we'll spend some time on questions at the end of today's session as well. Here at Pragmatic Marketing, we are really serious about listening to the market and driving our product development decisions using facts from our actual market that we're going to be targeting. I'd like to welcome you all here today, and I'll turn this over to Stephanie so we can dig in.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Stephanie Bergman. I am a lifelong product manager. I started working in product management back in the original bubble startup phase in the late 90s in New York City, and then moved out to San Francisco and California, and have worked in product really from a time when product management was kind of the person who did everything to get software up and running, from UX and anything else that needed to be done, to now where we all have very explicit disciplines that we work in, and have worked with Patrick in a number of different companies over the years, and I'm thrilled to be doing this with him. And Patrick?
Yeah, my name is Patrick Neeman. I am currently working as a director of product design at a company called Apptio. How I got started in the web, the first website I ever designed was the All Over North homepage. And I started as a web designer, saw some information architecture documents that somebody was creating, said I wanted to do that. And I have been doing this close to 20 years, I think in like 19 years, and have done a lot of speaking around UX. And I'm glad to be here today too. And shall we get this started?
Yeah.
Sure. So what is user experience? Advancing to the next slide. That's a kind of really big question. Most people don't understand it. When I show this next slide to my friends, during presentations, everybody has a different interpretation of user experiences, and they even have the interpretation of they think that user experience is just the look and feel. And what they don't realize is that user experience covers all 6 of these fields. Information architecture, interaction design. Hold on for one sec. You can't hear me on the headset?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I'm going to keep going. So it covers the competencies of user experience are these 6 fields. The first is information architecture, which is sitemaps, taxonomy, metadata, a lot of overall site structure information. Interaction design.
Can you explain, Patrick, what information architecture means? Because I get a lot of people who don't. When I say I would like to see an IA diagram, or I want to do a sitemap, there are many different kind of understandings, I think, of what that actually means.
Well, we just describe it as the overall structure of the site. It's basically how the user flows to the site. For example, when I describe information architecture, I describe how does the person get from page A to B going through C or D. Like sites that have really deep information architectures are like the New York Times, a lot of really deep reporting platforms like Apptio. That's how I describe it. Does that make sense?
So to make sure there are no orphan pages, or pages that you're designing that people have no way to get to.
Yeah, or even that it doesn't take 8 clicks to get there. Like a lot of the IA issues that we're working through here at Apptio is it might take 5 clicks to get to a report, where it really should take 3. Or we developed what we call role-based IA, where it's specifically targeted at a single user. So when they log into the system, when they log into the system, they know that they are this user, and instead of showing the complete system, they only show the pages that are pertinent to that role.
That makes sense.
Okay, like interaction design, and this is a lot of the stuff that we did at MySpace, was, it's basically the page level information for information architecture. When you think about web forms, about registration processes, that's interaction design, for example. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Visual design is what a lot of people think UX is. They think it's Photoshop files. They think it's PNGs. They think of, well, let's make it look pretty. And this is usually where the UX designer is throwing things at the PM, going like, no, 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 that's not what we do. And it's so much more.
So what program should you be working in? Like, if it's not Photoshop, is Balsamic, or what if UX is looking to find a tool?
Well, like a lot of UX designers, their tools are varied. For example, I use a wireframing tool called OmniGraffle to build IA and interaction design documents. I've seen people use Keynote. I've seen them use PowerPoint. A lot of times they use Balsamic, but they're all just communication tools. Where visual design tends to be, this is the final deliverable of how we represent it to the developer, and it holds all the visual tricks of the colors and the shapes and everything. Visual design is still part of UX, but it's not all of it. It's one of the six.
Okay, that makes sense.
The other three areas that people forget about is the user research part. Like a lot of times when we go out and talk to users in a very structured manner, that's user research. I also combine in there usability testing as part of user research. Like after you build a prototype or you do paper prototyping, and you have either an informal or structured approach to testing your ideas, that's user research or usability testing. Another area of UX is content strategy. And this is an area that me and you have collaborated on certain projects, where you will write a lot of the copy, and you'll talk a lot about the SEO, or I'll write the copy, and that's where we would work. That's where we work together. Some companies have dedicated content strategists. Other companies, the PM or the UX person picks it up. Does that make sense?
I'm a big fan. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the content strategy role. I feel like a lot of websites either underplay the importance of content strategy or underplay the importance of SEO and thinking through things like keywords. I think it's an interesting role because it falls in between marketing and product and UX, and it's kind of one of those things where unless you actually take the time to concentrate on it, the words that are on your page fall to kind of whoever put them first. So I'm a big fan personally of using lorem ipsum a lot when designing and just dummy text, so people don't get used to seeing words on certain buttons and assume those are the words that you're going to go with, when it could have been something that was written while somebody was just putting together a site, just to have a word on a button, like click here or whatever. And content strategy to me requires, you step back and you think through what action are you looking to do in the case of SEO. And SEO, I mean, both content and technical, the technical side of SEO, meaning, the back-end infrastructure for your URL structure, things like that. The words you use are important. And it's not necessarily the role of either UX or product to know what the important marketing keywords and what you're trying to gain rank on or something. And having someone hand you a list of words isn't quite as far as it goes either. It requires some really strategic thinking around why you're linking from here to here, what you're going to say when you link from here to here, what that page is going to be named. So it can kind of, this is one of the mushy roles that are out there, is who handles exactly what is on the text and who handles SEO, which is search engine optimization, to improve traffic into your website.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even go one further than this. Like content strategy for me is also like what, back to what words you put on the page. I've worked at places where we've actually done usability testing just around testing certain words that we're using for user understanding. And it's kind of like the red-headed stepchild with the plaid sweater. In a lot of places, information architecture, the content strategist will also do the information architecture, because they'll understand the overall site structure and the approach for the content, and it'll drill down into how the site will flow.
Sure. I remember at AOL we had a big conversation at one point around the difference between calling something pictures, pics, P-I-X, and P-I-C-S. It's the same word, but it has three very different connotations. And if you're talking about how you're referring to something, are you uploading photos? Are you uploading pictures? Are you uploading pics? It means something, and it means something different to everyone who sees it. So yeah, that's an area where research can really help you define kind of which words you go with. And in the case of AOL, we had AOL photos and AOL pictures, and they were different products for different audiences. And like we had blogs and journals, and they were different products for different audiences, but the words ultimately, they mean the same thing, but different connotations. So it's important what words you use, and taking some time to think about them is key.
Yeah, we better move this along a little bit. So HTML prototyping is the last competency. Like when you think of a unicorn designer, and this is actually on one of the next slides, don't expect unicorns, but a lot of designers, they hold multiple competencies. For example, the visual designer that I have here at Apptio, he's really strong in visual design and HTML prototyping, for example. I know a lot of designers that are strong in interaction, visual, HTML prototyping, but the reason that I'm showing all 6 spots is I'm saying, and this is actually coming out of some of the questions that are appearing in the chat, don't expect all 6. Another example is a typical visual designer. This is actually a typical content strategist. This slide is wrong. But like a typical content strategist will have user research skills, content strategy skills, and an IA skills, but they're not going to have interaction design, visual design, or HTML prototyping. One of the designers I'm working with here, she's really strong in IA, information architecture, interaction design. However, she doesn't have skills around spatial. And so what I do here is I put together a team where there are other members of the team that can help her with some of that, and so we work in concert with each other. So like I don't have anybody that has all 6, but when you put the team together, they have all 6.
And that makes a lot of sense, because people are better when you let them do what they are good at and you let people specialize. And we'll be talking more and more about the role, making sure you stick to your role and you know kind of what you are good at and what your core competency is and what it's not, is really important. And that's true, with UX and with product people too. It's a big discipline, and within that discipline there are additional specialties.
Yeah. So you want to talk about what is product management?
Sure. So this is
it's him.
The world's best known product manager. This is not what we are supposed to be. Product managers have to be able to manage many roles and wear many hats. And he is not our primary example, but he is the best one known out there. So when in a product manager, you have to manage all of your stakeholders, and you're managing all of the different visions that are out there for what you are doing. And implementing Scrum is a great comic book. It's a lot of fun. And it has all these little comics that are about roles and managing and how to specifically handle things in Scrum. And this is just a great example to me on how backlog management, which is a key thing that product owners do, where we maintain the backlog or the prioritized list of features we're trying to get into our product. And this is an example of a poor product owner, where they are not really taking much of anything into consideration from their stakeholders and just doing what they want. Your job is to make sure everybody on your team is on board with your overall strategy, and they don't feel like I'm not doing anything I'm doing to move things forward. And in the case of UX management, it's extremely important. UX will often come to you as a product owner with a need to update pixels on a page to make things match a new style guide or something. And while Patrick's probably rolling his eyes at me, because of course that's important, and why is Stephanie saying this is something that I might not want to put on my backlog? But from a product owner, you're looking at the bigger picture. You can't forget any single stakeholder, and making sure stuff looks good on the screen as well as it functions is really important. So taking UX specific stories as well as other people on your team is key. And so what we do, we are the people who are in the middle of everything. Our role is to make sure that the business value of your product and the strategy of the company, the marketing research that's going on, the personas, the feedback you're getting from users, that all of that comes together and is explained and managed. You are a product manager and managed together to make a better backlog. Yep.
Can we go back one slide because I want to comment about that, about 11?
My comic.
So, and this is and we've had a lot of conversations about this over drinks. Like, what I'm looking to you as a PM is I want you to bring me to the promised land. Like, I want you to be the one that drives the vision and says, this is where I think the product's going. I want you to share that vision with me because I need that vision in my head when I'm designing the product. Like, for example, like a lot of times when I do this, I use that vision and I combine it with the personas and kind of like the needs assessment and the users to method out and really design products that I think meet that vision and meet the users that are targeted for that vision. I really don't like working with product managers that are just, running the schedule and checking the box. I want people that, the product managers, they don't manage anybody, but they manage a product, and I want them to be able to sell and convince me this is the idea that I think will sell to customers.
Right, and we help, and that vision comes from the next slide, which is the whole group, including, pulling in the business goals of the company, where our money comes from, what our users want. User research and UX can, lead into that pretty heavily by helping us define the vision and then also prioritizing the features, deciding what's more important, what should be higher priority. That's where the voice of the user can come through UX more than necessarily any of these other spikes. UX is largely the voice of the user, while product managers are somewhat the voice of the company and kind of keeping the whole team together, working as the go-between with engineering with what's possible, and UX saying what they would like to accomplish and how. And just making sure that you end up with the vision that accomplishes the goals of all of the individual stakeholders.
Yeah, like one of the examples of where UX and like CX, which is customer experience, differs is UX is, okay, what does the user need? And the CX is like, how do we sell the product? And a lot of times they're different. And there have been times where I've worked with product managers where we developed features that didn't have a lot of user experience value. It was kind of like, frosting on the cake. However, it's what I call the pen rolling down the clipboard. We knew if we showed it during the demo, people were going to sign a check. And so even there are differences where the product owner has to make some decisions that are actually might be counterintuitive for UX value.
Yes, and a lot of that defending, why are you doing this? This makes no sense, to a UX person explaining the business need and what the case is for having a specific feature helps as well. And we'll get into that a bit more later also, how explaining the goal of every specific feature down to even a button level will make the UX better in the long run. I just want to address one quick question I saw from chat saying I'm using the words product manager and product owner interchangeably. That's partially just a side effect of my current role at ADP where I am a product owner, and I've been both in the past. It's very difficult to separate the two. I have been in a role before actually where Patrick and I met at MySpace. I was a product manager, not a product owner on the developer platform. The decision was because what I was working on was a largely developer-focused product and an API-driven product, that it would make more sense for a developer to have final say basically in prioritizing features and deciding what was more important, and the final vision would come from the developer because they were ultimately the end user of the product not me as more of a business and UX engineering go-between. It's difficult, and to be honest, I ended up doing the role of product owner largely anyway. And really, the difference is largely just the definitive role. A product owner, you have veto power on your backlog. You prioritize things. It is your job to make sure everything gets done. And at the end of a sprint, if we're talking, product owner role in Scrum, it's your responsibility what you accept. And while it's the whole team responsible for making sure it gets done, if something doesn't happen, it falls on your head. With product manager, you are a lot of that ownership power, I guess, is off, and it's more of a team, who accepts something at the end and decides whether or not it can go. So it's just really a more definitive role, and I find it very difficult to be a product manager without a product owner. Yeah.
So to that point, like being a product owner at MySpace, the engineers were closer because they were closer to the target audience. There are other places that these roles would work at where the designer might be a closer representation of the product owner, and then even other places where the product manager might be the product owner, correct?
Yes, definitely. There is the voice of the customer has to be someone on your team. It might not always be the product owner. Most places that does fall to UX. But, at MySpace we made a very conscious decision, and it came out of weeks of meetings actually, that we would have a developer as the final say. And it actually, for the platform, I think it worked out very well because there were stories many times that were too technical for me to fully understand what was going on. If we were defining an API set, we're defining a code base. I was not the person who knew enough about the story at the end of the day to decide whether or not it would be accepted. And that's the key thing, is just whoever has the power on saying something is complete has to be the person who is in their user's head. And whoever it falls on the team, and I believe the rule is it could be anyone at the end of the day, they just need to understand they are speaking for their end user as well as everyone else, and need to be willing to say that's more important than that, or no, I will not accept this story until X is done. And that requires a lot of knowledge about what's going on with the product and why you're doing it.
So where do the roles overlap?
Very heavily.
This is where the fun begins. So there's this matrix of different responsibilities, and where the roles mainly overlap are the user stories. In my mind, and Stephanie, we've gone back and forth on that, like product management and user experience have to be in lockstep in writing the user stories because there's so much detail and almost precision that goes into writing user stories to correctly describe what functionality that we want to build. And I would even see like high-level requirements the two have to collaborate really closely too, because they have to be in lockstep on understanding who the user is and what their goals are.
Yeah, absolutely. Developers develop based on UX. At the end of the day, and I was just talking to a developer about this yesterday, they don't develop based on the user story as much as we would like them to. And QA definitely tests based on what we write as user acceptance criteria, which is the list of kind of what I need to be accomplished in order to say this feature is done. The developer still will open up the UX, look at that, and build that. So if there's a feature that either is in the UX and isn't in your user story, or vice versa, you're just going to have a confused developer, and you're not going to have a very good product at the end. So a lot of collaboration, making sure that we're all trying to accomplish the same goal as well. This is where it kind of comes back to what the company is trying to accomplish. Is really important, and collaborating to make sure the stories and the UX and everything all mapped up is very key.
Like one of the areas that we would work together, and we work together on a project like this, is you wrote a lot of epics of what you were trying to accomplish we wrote a first cut of user stories. I would do a whole bunch of wireframes, and then I would go back to you and say, hey, these 5 additional user stories fell out when I did the wireframes, and then we would add it to the backlog. That's a really good example of where user experience would actually add to the backlog and add to product management considerations, where if it was just product management saying, well, these are the user stories that I want, user experience would be like, well, geez, I can't accomplish X, Y, and Z because it's not in the user stories. So that's where that collaboration really has to happen.
And you definitely end up with a better product this way. I mean, on day one, like the old school waterfall style of product development where, we would write a 90-page spec and then we would throw it over a wall to UX wasn't great in any way, but also was very difficult because I would joke, that doing PRDs would be, you would have to describe a doorknob. That was my example of a PRD. But when you actually unpack that, a doorknob is a user interface element. That's not the kind of thing that should have gone in a PRD. And it really didn't allow any flexibility for UX to figure out how to improve the process, like the example you used before where instead of having 4 clicks to get to something, you could just kind of sideswipe it and go through one. That's why the collaboration and keeping your requirements as high level as you can until you've met with UX and you've talked to your users and you've done the research and you know the business needs will definitely get the stories much better as they go forward. So thinking about stories and requirements and UX as a collaborative, living document instead of something that you define and hand off to someone is key.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So here's some examples. We're going to run through them really quick. Users should be able to onboard. PM will supply data fields, and product design or user experience will design the onboarding process. Same for entering a profile. A lot of it's form design for UX, where the requirements are what PM wants to collect from the user. Users should be able to navigate through an application. The product management will supply the use cases in the user path. User experience will do the information architecture. Landing on a role-specific landing page. Product management will talk about the kind of things they want to show on the page and what data that they want to show. And then product design will actually show the screens, the data visualizations to tell the story. The user should be able to set product milestones. This is the calendar example that we're going to use later in the presentation. Product design will actually further define the requirements. Users should be able to follow a workflow. PM will talk about the general workflow steps based on their market research, and product design will actually design a more efficient workflow to make it all work. And how can they work together? The way that I talk about it is I always say product management is what and user experience is how. So Stephanie, how would you describe that?
Product management, we're there to figure out kind of what's on the page, what the general features are, elements, individual elements, what can be there. But again, this is where it's collaborative because there are things that UX may come up with. And UX figures out how to tie it all together. So I may define all the data sources I want on a page and the general goal I want to have accomplished by that page. And then UX says how, and we work together, I think, on the why for the user.
Yeah, for example, the what could be, I want to show a composition of a composition of data, and the how could be show a pie chart.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Here's another slide that describes more of it.
So yeah, this is at the end of the day, it's a product manager's role to make sure things work and things work the way we ultimately want them to, and that is the grand we of the business and all the stakeholders. And UX designers have to get us there. Right?
So when can they work together? This is my favorite slide.
This is the game of telephone that so often happens with customers, yes.
Yeah. a lot of times when you talk to customers, we call it the faster horses thing, and where that comes from is Henry Ford had this quote where he talked to a whole bunch of users, and they said, well, he said to them, hey, how do you want to get somewhere? And they said, we want to get somewhere faster. So if you took that literally, Henry Ford would have developed a horse that had 8 legs. And what they really wanted was somewhere that was more efficient in a different vehicle, so that's how he built the car. And a lot of times when I describe these features and I hear user feedback, what they're really saying is what I call a faster horse. That's the interpretation, where we really want to get more core understanding of what they're trying to accomplish.
Right, and it's important to remember on all sides of this that, a customer isn't going to know what the latest and greatest in technology is. They're not going to know what's technically possible. They're not going to think about that cool interaction scheme that they saw on a website the other day. They're going to express their needs, and I've seen a lot of research where they say, well, would you prefer if this button was over here? And that's not necessarily the most helpful of stuff, because you get people either who want to be excessively helpful or really don't know what they want, but they can describe what they need and what their goal is in hitting a page and what they're trying to accomplish. And it's your role to figure out how to best achieve that.
And the first place where this really happens is user research. Like a lot of times when product managers and user experience designers work together currently, is the PM will go out and visit customers, and they'll talk to them about a bunch of different things, and the designer isn't there, and they get back a whole bunch of market requirements, but a lot of times the questions are asking the customer, well, what do you really want? And a lot of times you get the faster horse conversation. When you have a UX designer go out during the initial user research and some of the market research, the UX designer will take into consideration the context of the user. For example, it won't be just asking the user, this is what you need, but it will be looking in the context of the greater situation of like, wow, there's all these other applications they have to work on, or wow, their desk is a mess. Or they'll look at stuff like, there's these other tools that actually they're using to accomplish what they're doing, and they're not going to get away from it. A lot of times, for example, applications put in some kind of email notification system for users to talk to one another, where in reality it's easier for a user to just open up Outlook and send a note to another user that's using the system and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to get across.
And that's where it's important just to know who your user is. Users, if they're already in one program all day long, integrating into what they're currently using all day makes a lot more sense than making something completely different. If they're not the kind of person who is, head deep in some specific program all day, then making something separate makes sense. But that's where personas and understanding your users' needs and who they are is really key. You wouldn't design the same thing for like my father as you would a 13-year-old girl, for example.
Yeah,
and it's important to know that.
Yeah. Like in the personas, and you would agree with me, Stephanie, the user experience designer and the product manager have to have a shared understanding of who the personas are and exactly what their goals are, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And that is pretty key. And as you go through the design process, you need to look at all of your stuff from the perspective of your user. Great example that I always use when I talk about understanding your users is MySpace. A lot of people, Patrick and I have been mentioning it a bit, we met there, we both worked there. A lot of people have given MySpace a hard time for being ugly pages back in the day, and you would get to crazy profiles where everything was customized. The reason that happened is because Tom Anderson, who was Tom from MySpace, would sit in chat and IM with users on a daily basis. And if a user said to him, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this, then he would go do it. What happened was the most active people Tom talked to were teenagers, because they were the ones who had the time to hang around and chat with him when he was at work. And so what you saw was really a site that was largely created by its teenage audience. I find it personally really interesting that the more removed Tom got from the product development process and the less users got involved, the cleaner the look of MySpace became and the less popular it became as a website. And I think there's just a very interesting lesson there. I'm not saying it's a great idea to take one person's advice in chat as something you should go do to your site right now, especially when you're working on a site of 100 million people. It's probably a good idea to do some real research first. But it did, for a while there, really help MySpace grow because you had these users who were seeing their input taken into account immediately, and then they were becoming champions of their website. And at the end of the day, your users need to feel like their needs are met, and they need to have that sense of delight and enjoyment that they get at being a part of your product.
So yeah, I wanted to add to Stephanie's comment, and we'll do this really quickly. When Tom stopped listening, there were some wireframes that were presented on the wall. I was partially involved in that process. We would show the wireframes to people who were more in the target audience at MySpace, people that I knew, and they were like, I would never use this. This doesn't meet my needs. And that was about the time that Tom started stepping away from the user needs and started listening to other people. And another thing about user experience design is we're not really designers. We are facilitators. And we facilitate the design process to take all the best ideas from everybody on the team and put them together and come up with a solution that meets the user needs. So a lot of times when designers work with PMs, they facilitate the design process on a whiteboard and sketch sessions. A lot of times what I'll do with PMs is I'll design something really quick, knowing that it's completely wrong, so I can elicit feedback from them and get a better sense of what they're looking for.
Yeah, not everything always has to be right. You do that with testing sometimes too. You show things just to get ideas out of people, and just because it's easier to talk about a thing than an idea.
And the next slide is communication. Basically, one of the biggest complaints of most UX designers is they get a lot of information filtered. We need all the information we can get so we can get a better understanding of what the user needs and goals are, and that means a regular flow of communication. The less you involve user experience designers in the process of meetings, user research, user visits, general meetings with engineers, the less empowered they are to make decisions that are in the best interest of the user. And you want to talk more about that?
If you're in the world of Scrum or sprints, or you have weekly team meetings, anything like that, a lot of times we don't think to include UX in things like our backlog grooming meetings or our planning meetings, but we have major decisions that come out of that meeting because you have all the designers in a room, all the developers in a room, talking about what's technically feasible. The product owner is being put, on, basically they have to make the decision in that meeting, will this feature happen or not? And having someone there who can speak up both from a design perspective and UX and learn what's going on, and also speak for the user and say, well, if those two things came down to it, I think users would choose A over B, and the reason I think that is because, is really important. So I've been including user research folks in more and more of our product design sessions lately, and it's been really interesting. I brought them into a card sort, in fact, we did last week, just to kind of see how it would work. And even little things like what should go under what menu heading, they had a lot of really positive feedback that had come out of direct user interaction and helped us come up with a better result.
And so why do precise requirements matter?
So just to go through an example of, we were saying earlier, to stick with your role. So as a product owner, to stick with what's on the page, not how. Old school requirement style, if I was writing a requirement for a calendar for baseball game dates, this is kind of what I would write, just general description, and then I would attach a handy-dandy mock-up to make things really clear to UX kind of what I was looking for, which is a calendar of baseball game dates. and I did this myself, as I'm sure you can tell.
Yeah, so playing out this role, this is because me and Stephanie have worked together. I would walk over to Stephanie's computer and uninstall the Somnic. I'd drag it to the trash can and delete it and say, you're not supposed to do that anymore. Because me and Stephanie would sit down and go,
so
what
are you
really trying to accomplish here, Stephanie?
Right. And I'm not doing my job as a product owner when I provide a mock-up like that, because I'm not giving any reasoning behind why I want what I want. And that's really where, in the user story, product owners tie together all of the different parts of their product. So in the example here, I know, for example, that the business goals of my company are to increase sales of tickets and to get more traffic to the website, for example. So as a user, I want to view an individual game date so that I may invite friends to join me. That gives UX a direction to go and iterate and come up with ideas beyond my boring calendar, and also will help accomplish the goal of the company through that feature. And every single button, every single thing you put on your page really needs the so that. Why are you doing that? And that's where UX can take over and can find a really special way to accomplish a goal that's beyond just a calendar.
Yeah, and back to Stephanie's point, like, there are a million things that PM should be doing. Wireframing isn't one of them. We can sit in front of a whiteboard and discuss some ideas, but like, I actually want the PM to be focused on other tasks they should be doing, because there are areas where I am much better and much faster and have a better process and approach in doing it. And sometimes I'll work with a PM to elicit the requirements, and I'll actually help them write the user stories in the format that you see on the screen.
And this actually came up as in an actual meeting where I think I had written a requirement that I needed a calendar and was challenged and told, that's not the right way to do that. And so for my own purposes, I wanted to unpack this and kind of look at why you don't say calendar, and you end up with a better product in the end for thinking through why you're doing what you're doing and not getting lost in what the interface is going to be.
Yeah, we call it solutioneering, where you bring me the solution without understanding the problem. Like, tell me what the problem is, and then we'll figure out what the solution is.
Exactly.
So how do you resolve conflicts? This is where you break out. We recommend the Kill to the Death. Alexander Hamilton, Aaron Bird, boy, they'd be proud. Remember your role. Like, everywhere I've worked at, I've had a pretty good idea of, and it's kind of based on personalities, but I've had a pretty good idea of like what I'm supposed to do. And it's usually, and again, this is me looking at it from one side, it's usually PM that's kind of been kind of fuzzy about it. But you gotta have the shared agreement of like, these are areas I'm really, really good at, and this is what I can focus on as a UX designer. And then I want to work with product managers that they focus in areas that we're really good at. And then there's this area in the middle that both of us can collaborate on and use that kind of flexibility to create a great product.
And if you can't come up with a why for a specific element, you can talk to your UX people. They will probably have a lot of ideas. Talk to your business folks. There's a reason why you're doing everything you're doing, and you're not necessarily the person who has to have all the answers, but you are expected to be the person who knows where to get those answers. So don't feel like you're supposed to be the expert in everything, but you should at least know where to go, and that's just communication and talking to other people.
Yeah, and another way to do it, like, for example, I've been doing user experience for such a long time. A lot of times when we're at an impasse, I'll come up with, hey, in my experience at a past product, this is what happened. However, if there's a conflict, it's always good just to test. Like to get a third voice, a fourth voice, a fifth voice, do guerrilla usability testing, show it to other people, kind of test the hypothesis of what you have so that way you can break that impasse.
And the product will always end up better in the end for it. I mean, it's great in that we always have a fallback when we disagree over things. There are different ways to test things, and you just choose a method and you throw it out there and you see what happens. Ultimately, it's not who wins an argument because it's up to your user. It's really you're looking for the best for your user and for your company. And that's why the testing is what's really most important. It's not my opinion or Patrick's opinion, even if my opinion's right all the time.
It's right until you're wrong, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I've definitely been proven wrong in user testing, and that's what it's there for. It's fun learning about your user and finding out what they find is important, because a lot of times they will really surprise you.
So here are three methods of user testing that I've used in the past. One is guerrilla testing, where there's a single concept that I've taken, where a paper prototype or a Photoshop mock-up and showed it to people and said, hey, what do you think? And then we'll go back and forth a bit. We'll test it a lot for like affordance of a button, understanding an icon, doing a set of words, but it's usually a very, very targeted use case, one simple task, just to get an idea, am I completely off base or not? You want to talk about formal testing?
Yeah, so formal testing is when you bring people in and you walk them through things. Either you can do prototype testing, click testing, but it is generally in some kind of laboratory environment. I've done it in a tiny little room where I'm sitting in a corner watching a researcher with the user, and I've done it with two-way glass where there are a whole bunch of people behind a screen. But they are brought through a very, very formal study. The great thing of it is you walk out of there with so much information about your user and what they want to accomplish. The problem is you walk out of there with so much information. It's very hard to do formal testing unless you have a formal tester role who can really take the time and unpack that information into usable things. One of the most frustrating pieces of testing is when you get tons of data and you don't know what to do with it. Because a lot of times the largest voice will just win. So doing formal testing is really important, but you need to have a plan on how you're actually going to consolidate and make use of the data.
Yeah,
and then
for
A/B
example,
testing is the easiest.
Yeah, and I'll talk about that. Well, like guerrilla and formal testing are what we call qualitative information, where you're testing it in front of like a really small group of users. You get a lot of information. You get a little bit of information about what was wrong with it, but you get a lot of information about why it was wrong. A/B testing is you test 2 or 3 different versions of a button or some words, and you don't know why it was wrong. You just know it worked. And a lot of times, like MySpace, for example, they would do really simple A/B testing on the home page, and they knew within hours, because of the amount of traffic they were getting, what would work, but they wouldn't understand why it would work. So a lot of times, user experience, good UX designers and good product managers will combine formal and A/B testing to get a clear understanding of what's going on with the product. And do you want to know more about user experience? There's a couple of books that I recommend. One of them is called UX for Lean Startups. It was written by Laura Klein, and it's a really good basic, hey, here's ways of doing user experience quickly, using a lot of guerrilla testing, using a lot of lean methodology approaches. Another one is a more formal book called A Project Guide to UX Design, and that was written by Russ Unger, and that covers a lot of the more formal methods of doing user experience, like how do you write a usability test plan, what information architecture is. It's written at a little higher level than most product managers would want to go, but if you want to get a deeper understanding, that's a good start.
Cool. So we have a bunch of questions. Maybe we should get to those. Let's see. Should I just ask you a question, Patrick, from one of our users?
Sure.
So I have an opinion on this one, but I would love your opinion. If there is not a UX role, who is best to own it, product or engineering? And the reason we're laughing is because when Patrick came into MySpace, I went to MySpace from AOL, and AOL I had UX people I worked with and researchers and all of that. At MySpace, my first day, I was asked to mock up a new screen. And from then on, it became very clear that product managers were expected to do UX. And what happened, and part of why we brought in Patrick was because it wasn't quite working in that product. You know, we have our role. Our role is to think through the vision of the product and how we accomplish the needs of the company and the user. Our job wasn't to know how to best design things to accomplish those. But yeah, I would say not product, but that's just because I'm a very poor UX designer. What do you think?
Well, we have this discussion a lot. I think product and engineering can work together with some really basic methodologies to do user experience in a lot of companies. A lot of engineering-heavy companies do that if there's not a lot of front-facing stuff. And as long as they're testing in front of users and they're doing it in a structured way, that can totally work. Whenever you're designing a product, regardless of your job title, you're doing user experience. But if you're not following any kind of methodology or any kind of process or framework, you're just not doing user experience well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
So, like, if you read up on some of these books and you look around for some best methodologies, a lot of times you can find an engineer that's really concerned about user experience, that's willing to learn it, or you can find a product manager that picks up some of it and does it. It really just depends on the person that you have in the building.
Sure. So. Hey, Patrick, this is Stacy. I've also had some pretty good experience with people who came through technical publications. And as they're trying to write about the product, they start to transition into design, which probably makes sense because we probably need fewer tech writers the better design we do.
Yeah, actually a lot of tech pubs people, they're making the transition to content strategists, which if you go one step further, they're making the transition to information architecture. So they actually make really good user experience designers when they do that. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll ask a question. Here's one for you. What's best for where best for the UX role to sit, within product or within engineering? Stephanie?
Well, that's the one I just answered. I think not with product, but I guess if you don't have some place to put them, if you're asking structurally within a company, it's UX is somewhat technical, so often with engineering makes sense. I think with product the roles get a little smushed and we start to tend to throw elements on pages without thinking through how they work. And I would push back pretty hard against putting product and UX together in the same organization.
Well, I think the question is, should UX be reporting the product or should they be reporting the engineering?
And that's why I'm torn, because it's a split role. It's not really either. It is a technical role because you do need some concept of what's possible, but product is largely a business position where you are working with all of the different stakeholders to accomplish the goals of the company. And UX kind of needs to be a little apart from that. It's kind of a third specialty. So I wouldn't really know where to stick it if you had to pick one. What would you pick?
It's interesting in that
neither group is going to like this answer. I actually am advocating a lot of companies of splitting it and having it report directly into the CEO and establishing it as its own department, because I view product engineering and UX as a three-legged stool, and even though product is the product owner in a lot of places, like each of them have an equal partnership in building a great product. There are a lot of political issues that happen with product reporting into either UX reporting into either department, and by splitting it, it creates this interesting conflict that in a lot of places creates better products. You want to ask a question?
Sure. Oh, I'll take this one. So I'm not sure I agree with your definition of product versus UX. I believe product managers are actually the voice of the customers. They're not the voice of the company. I disagree with that. I believe that as a product manager, you have multiple stakeholders. One of your stakeholders is the user, but one of your stakeholders is also your company, and you have goals and business requirements that you need to accomplish with your product. And at least at a lot of companies, the product manager is the only place that the business goals really get involved in the requirements. You are working with other business people, but a UX person isn't going to know necessarily that, for example, we really want to push this feature because the more people that turn this feature on, the more money it saves us as a company. And that is your job to make sure that UX understands that and is able to balance that with the overall user needs in the product.
So I'm aligned with Stephanie on it. Like I look at this, there's three separate goals. There's the business goals, there are the customer goals, and then there are user goals. And a lot of times when you design features or you design, products, you might actually design things that are counterintuitively not for the user, but mean a more profitable business. For example, you might make certain decisions of how you document help because you want to drive user, basically you want to drive some kind of subscription model, for example, for charging the users to talk to their customer support people or talk to consultants. Yeah, it's like, for example, a lot of enterprise products, they're actually developed in such a way to where they want you to use their services organization. So that's a business need over a user need.
Right, and that's, there are cases where you sometimes want people to move through extra steps or slow down decision-making process. I remember when I worked at Yola, and I think I talked to you even about this. Yola is a website builder. We discovered through research that the faster someone created a website, the less they liked it. And we needed to slow things down to make it better. It gives us more opportunity to upsell them, but also gives us more opportunity to make sure they really like what they get at the end. So sometimes things aren't necessarily getting people from A to Z the fastest way possible. It's the best way possible that accomplishes everyone's goals, and that being the company and the user and all the other stakeholders involved.
So I'll take the next one. When does UX get involved in a lean environment?
I knew you were going to take that one.
Yeah. As early as possible. There's a lot of people that say UX only works in Waterfall, whatever. I believe all the different approaches, development methodologies, are just different checkpoints on what does the product look like now. The way I use Agile, the way I view Agile is that instead of presenting something every 6 months, I'm presenting something every week to every 2 weeks, and I don't view it as that much different. It's just you're presenting smaller pieces, but you're also getting feedback quicker. So the quicker to get at the customers and show it to them saying, hey, does this make sense to you, the quicker you can course correct, and the more effective you can build designs. I was actually a product manager at one company where we did 2-week sprints, and we were actually able to tie the revenue back to specific features that we released to users because we were showing it to them so quickly. And even though that particular product had longer transaction cycles, it was immensely valuable to show them where the product was going. So instead of them seeing stuff 6 months out, they saw things every 2 weeks.
And one thing that, from the business side of things, the hard part about doing UX in a lean environment or an agile environment is that you really need top-down agreement that this is what you are going to do. Because ideally you don't define final UX until you go into development on it. And a lot of larger companies really want to see all of their mocks up front and all of their designs up front. But the idea behind doing Agile is you learn every single step along the way, and you're constantly iterating and testing. So as long as everybody's on board with, starting with wireframes and learning as things go, and really working more where they'll see less on the page, but it'll be better thought out, and stuff will come in as it goes, you end up with a better product in the end. It's very hard to sit there on day one and define everything. I said that before for product requirements, but it's true for UX as well. The more you give people opportunities to constantly iterate and learn from what's going out there, the better the product will be.
You want to pick one?
Sure.
And you guys, just a little time check. I think we have probably have time for each of you to take one more, and then we should wrap this up. We're right at the top of the hour.
Okay.
Okay. I will take one quick. Where is the business analyst in the diagram? So I've only worked in one company with business analysts, so I may not be the perfect person to answer this, but I'll take a shot. The way I've used business analysts before is they basically sit in between UX and product, and they help analyze the UI and determine what's capable, and then work with product kind of on a slightly more technical level to understand what's capable. So defining how features and how data sources come in, and working between the different developers and the different back-end systems to make sure that what is represented on the page is accurate. But UX is still defining the way it's all flowing through the page, and product is still defining what's there. The BA is really sitting there to make sure that everything's correct and that you have the right data sources you're working with. I don't know if you've worked with BAs before.
Oh, me? In a lot of organizations, they're going away. I view BA as a support role for PM, not as an in-between. But those are for really large organizations too, right?
Well, it's
that's the only place I've hit them. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'll see.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. This is Stacy. We see that role. I mean, we just have access through our classes into so many different organizations, and I'll tell you that the business analyst role, I think it gets less and less clear every year. In some of those organizations, the business analysts have sort of moved toward product owner, a product owner role, so really acting more like a technical product manager. In other organizations, I've seen them sort of get pushed toward design roles, whether or not they're ready. And in some companies, that BA has really evolved into being the product manager. But I don't very often see product management, product owner, designer, and business analyst in the same company. Does that make sense?
I've heard business analysts referred to as product owner proxies before. That they're kind of there speaking for the role of the business. I think the piece that's missing in business analysts, at least in my experience, has always been the full view of working with all of the different stakeholders, including the user. The product owner and product manager's role is also very much to be in the space of the user, whereas a business analyst is largely in the role of the company and making sure the company's goals are accomplished. So I think you end up with a slightly different product focus when you have a product owner proxy through a business analyst versus a dedicated product manager.
Yeah, and also with the BAs, a lot of times I've seen this, and I'll keep this kind of short because I want to get to the next question, but I see BAs as one that they're taking notes and they kind of analyze it, but a lot of times I see where they don't make a lot of decisions, where UX people almost act as an adjunct product manager where they help make decisions we need to do this, and it surfaces in the product. So let's pick one more. There was one in here that was really interesting. The prototype, where did it go?
I wanted to answer that one too.
Yeah.
I'll read it.
Should somebody prototyping? So should somebody prototype it to give it to developers? Absolutely. One of the things I'm seeing more and more in different development environments is they're using JavaScript frameworks. So you have people prototyping and building actual functioning code with fake data to show to users, and it happens really, really quickly. And the minute that they have a pretty good decision on what the product is, they're able to hook up APIs, and pretty soon the app just lights up. We're doing some of that work here at Apptio. I've done it at 2 or 3 other places. The speed that you can prototype and test with users and come up with ideas is amazing, and it will transform software development.
And that's very much key to the lean and agile movement is, define things as best you can and just throw something up there, even if it's stitched together with Band-Aids to get it in front of users. Patrick and I both know Dina Varvashkaya. We worked with it at MySpace and is now CEO of Wanello. Dina is very proud of the fact that her background is totally in user experience and design, and she launched Wanello as basically a set of wireframes that she developed herself and threw up there just to see if users would start using it. And once people started using it and she started getting traction on it, then she started looking at hiring actual developers and actual designers. But I think she ran for about a year on code that she'd done herself as a UX person who was really just launching a prototype.
And that's about it.
And thank you guys very much for attending.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie or Patrick, any kind of final words you'd like to share?
Can I promote my blog?
And
I have a whole bunch of.
And funny, so you may as well.
Yeah, for my blog, usabilitycounts.com. I have a whole bunch more information about PMs and UX working together. I cover a lot of career development for user experience professionals. Just visit and search.
All right, outstanding. Thank you, everyone. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Stephanie, anything you want to say?
Just thanks, and be nice to your UX people. And remember, you can always test.
Too.
If you disagree, test.
All of the best products are designed on purpose.
Exactly.
So thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, for coming, and you all have a great day.